Hello and welcome to Gaming the Podcast. My name is John Robertson, joined as ever by Stace Harmon. And this week we are talking about the two hottest games right now, Sifu and Lost Ark. Two very different games. I think it's fair to say different in every way, actually. I mean, Lost Ark is an MMO, it's free to play, it's sort of an action RPG. Sifu is not free to play, it's not an MMO. It does have action in it, but it's not an RPG. Or is it an RPG?
And you don't have to queue up for 2.5 hours to play it. That's what I can say about Sifu. It's a bit more immediate than Lost Ark.
You could add that to your own experience, though. You could just sit there waiting for 2.5 hours and then see if you think like you're missing that bit of the Lost Ark experience, and that's really what Sifu needs, then you could artificially add it yourself. So it sounds like you've played... Well, it sounds like I know you've played Sifu.
I have.
I've also played a bit of Sifu. I've played much more Lost Ark, and you've not played any
more
Lost Ark.
It sounds like you've played more Lost Ark than you've done almost anything else in the last few days.
Yeah, well,
your stats or anything to go by.
Yeah, my Steam stats say that already I've played it for 40 hours. We're recording this on a Monday. I first loaded it up on Thursday. I had early access. I had 3 days early access, but only took advantage of one day. And yeah, it says that I've played it for 40 hours since Thursday night. So in four and a bit days. So I'm averaging about 10 hours, 9 to 10 hours a day at the moment.
So, right. Okay. So jokes notwithstanding about, weights and all this, it's just a cheap shot really, isn't it? It speaks to the server problems that lots of very, very big, very popular games have when they are first launched. It's a good problem to have in so much as lots of people want to play your game. But that aside, when you have been playing the game, I suppose my first most obvious question is, are those 2.5 hour wait times, are those, in a queue of 16,000 people to get on a server, is that borne out and, is the hype worth it? Is that kind of borne out by the play experience in your experience? How's that been? How's it been for you, those 40 hours?
I mean, I am enjoying it. I've got some problems with it and I'm kind of, in a way, I don't want to enjoy it because of some of the problems. Or because of the nature of some of the problems, or they're not even
because you
really
think they're
problems.
avoidable, or because
they're not even really problems. It's just some of the game design it's not a problem in that they've achieved what they've aimed for,
right.
But it's a problem. It's not as bad as some games, but there are some issues around the fact that it's free to play, and it does. It's not even that it pushes you into buying things, because I don't think it does. It doesn't try to tempt you too aggressively with the buying of stuff, and it needs players to buy stuff, because otherwise, where's the money coming from?
Yeah. But there are different ways of doing that, aren't there? Obviously there are. With free to play, this happens a lot. There's ways where it feels like you are encouraged to, you are gently reminded to, you are given what feels like genuine, like value for money perks. Even though, theoretically you don't need value for money because you're already getting a thing for free. But then there are games where it's like progress blocking, or they do things that make you feel like if I don't pay, then, I'm having a much worse time than if I do pay.
So, I mean, in Lost Ark, we just jumped on straight to the microtransactions and it's free to play nature. But anyway, that's a big part of the game. I mean, in Lost Ark, it's not overly cynical. Like it doesn't take away game elements that you'd expect, or that would be very helpful for your progress. It doesn't take those away and then ask you to pay to get them back. There are some It's
bits. Not the big kid at school taking your ball away and then you're taking your lunch money to give you your ball back.
It doesn't do that. But there are some design choices that I feel like have only been made because it's free to play. So I'm on level 30. So the structure of the game is levels 1 to 50 is considered like the main leveling up, and there's a soft cap at 50. You can then go beyond that and go to 60, and that's where all the high level end game raids and dungeons and whatever bosses are located. And to get to level 1 to 50 is really quick. Like I'm already at 30. And it doesn't seem to be, the pace of leveling doesn't seem to be slowing down, really. Like, you just fly through the levels until you get to level 50. I heard someone say that you can go from level 1 to 50 in like 12 to 15 hours, but then 50 to 60 takes like a couple months.
Right.
So it drastically slows down. And now,
although I would also say, like, the 40 hours, it's hard to work out, obviously, how long you've actually played for, but on the surface, even 30 hours, 30 to 40 hours it might be relatively a short space of time to get to a level cap versus some other MMOs, but that isn't a short space of time to spend with a game, is it? That's quite a long time to spend with a game. Something like, a lot of typical sort of AAA open world games might be like 15 to 20 hours or, up to 30 hours perhaps. So that's still quite a lot of game by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's, kind of, but not comparatively to other games of this sort. It's not.
Sure.
And, and I'm also surprised that that because it's a free to play game and getting to level 50 is supposedly so quick. I'm surprised at that because the quicker people get to, a lot of people will stop playing at 50, and then because it's so quick to get to 50, you've given them less chance to spend their money. So you can see the free to play design of the game in. So I'm trying to get my thoughts in my head straight here. So yes or no, the game doesn't too cynically take elements away and ask you to pay for them, but it does have some design functionality or some design choices in there that I think are because it's a free to play game. So the game is ridiculously easy. It's so easy, like way easier than Diablo, for example, of which has got sort of a similar-ish combat style. Way easier. Like, and I can only think that it's so easy. It's exciting that it's so easy, and it makes you feel really powerful that it's so easy, and it also. And so therefore, that causes you to engage with it over long because you're constantly achieving and being rewarded and overcoming stuff. So it feels really good. Like the game makes you feel good all the time. So then you're more likely to play. And if it was too hard and people on like on the level 25 boss or something, loads of people were failing and doing it 10, 15 times, well, then they're going to drop off, aren't they? And not play anymore. So you need the game to be quite easy in order to have a big enough player base to see through enough content to spend enough time in the game so that they buy stuff from you in the game. If it was too hard, then they wouldn't be able to do that. So I don't like the fact that in the game I can feel that they're making it easy for me on purpose because they want me to continue and they want me to unlock more stuff and they want me to get to the more complex stuff where I'm going to more likely need to buy stuff to help me progress at this same difficulty level. Because what I'm expecting to happen is a difficulty level suddenly going to ramp up after level 50. And then it's like, oh, and now I feel way less powerful. So one way to feel powerful again is buy stuff to bring me back to that old power level, that old comparative power level. I really don't like that bit of it. In fact, I hate that bit of it. And whenever I feel that bit happening, it feels like they're trying to like manipulate me in some way. And I really don't like that bit. And it's a shame because it looks great. The different skills that you can have are brilliant. Like the way that you can link them all together is fantastic. Like you unlock a lot of different attacks quickly, but you can only have like 8 assigned on your hotkeys at a time. So you need to choose and then choose how you level those up in respect to one another. I really like that. It looks fantastic. Mostly like the in-game worldy environment, the characters look fantastic. The menus are horrible. Like really, really horrible. Like literally, like it looks like just a default menu buttons that you'd get in like Unity without even like changing. Like they're just like grey boxes with white text. Just looks terrible. Just absolutely just way below what a game that's, hitting 1 million concurrent players and whatever should look like. And it's been out in Korea for 4 years as well, since 2018.
Yes,
so 3 and a bit years.
Yeah, that's an important point to make.
So they've had all this time to like refine the stuff and like, spend 4 years like really working out, okay, what's the exact difficulty level we need here to constantly engage players and have them spend money, etc., etc. But like, but in that time you couldn't fix the menus. So like I'm really split on it. Like it is really good. It's really engaging. It's very compulsive. It's very simple. Like the structure is really simple and it's really snappy. So you go to different areas. you've never got more than like 5 or 6 missions at a time. Whereas in like Final Fantasy 14 or whatever, you might have like 100.
Right.
But here you only ever have a few missions at a time. So it's very easy to see what you've got to do, where you've got to go, how you progress, how you move to the next zone. And on the mini map, it makes it really obvious as well. So you might have missions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 listed on the right hand side of your screen, like pinned to your screen, and then in the map it will just have like a number 2 or a number 1 with a big circle around it saying this is where you need to go for number 2 or mission, or this is where you need to go to collect these things or kill these things or whatever. I mean, you can also see its free to play nature in that it doesn't allow you to grind to over level yourself, so you can never become too strong for the content. And the way that they do that is that for like doing a mission, you might get like 1200 experience or something, but then for killing each individual enemy, literally, like even at level 30 enemies, you'll get 1 or 2 experience points per enemy. So like, and that doesn't do anything to your experience, because you might need 50,000 to hit the next level. So you're not going to go around and kill 25,000 enemies. So it prevents you from over leveling. So that they know, and I presume that that's done, so that they know exactly what level everyone's going to be at for each dungeon. So then they can very precisely determine a difficulty level for everyone. And so you can't become over leveled and so powerful for those dungeons that you'd need to go and buy stuff. Yeah. Sorry, it takes away the need to buy from the store. Now, I don't know if any of these things are definitely that's why they've designed them like that, but you know, if the shoe fits, like it seems to be, that's why they've done it.
So I'm interested in this because this sounds so okay. So the UX design, like the actual design of the HUD and the menus and stuff, doesn't sound like it's particularly great.
No, it works. It works. It's just very messy.
Sure, it's just not very attractive.
Some of the translations from the Korean, are just weird. Like there's some really weird translations happening. Again, for a game published by Amazon over here, got all this huge player base, had years to work on it. It's like, why are those little things still wrong?
So okay, so that from a presentational standpoint and from from the sort of the feeling that elicits when looking at it and interacting with it, that's not great. But on the other point of it feeling too easy, I feel like that probably ties into the grind thing. Like it seems like, well, why would you even want to if the game's quite easy anyway? So they're not setting it up, that they're not making it super punishing that would suggest you should be going to grind, and then making the grind impossible. And it's more like, and in place of that saying, oh, but if you give us $9.99, then you can unlock this super mega, XP boost where you actually get 20 XP per monster or whatever it might be. They're not doing that. They're just, the game sounds like it's just quite easy.
Yeah.
But isn't that also like the notion of thinking that that's being done for a reason? At its most basic, I suppose, isn't that like, worrying about the risk of rain when it's sunny? Like there's no, it feels that's probably what it is, but if it isn't, and if you're not sort of being shown that it is that, are you not kind of tempering your own enjoyment by thinking they might be doing that?
Well, maybe, but I also think it would be naive for me not to think that they're doing that. Like there's an element of cynicism, or at least skepticism, but it's also not wanting to be taken a ride for them. And I've played enough games like this, free to play or otherwise, to see where this has come from. Because I think the game would be better and would be more appealing to more hardcore like Diablo players. Like if you've ever played the Diablo game, high level, this is to say that the game's easy is an understatement. Like it is right. It's just like hit attack to win. And so at its worst, the game has got all of those like slot machine functionality that like a lot of free to play games hit to try to hit that like gambling, just sort of like battering you with rush. Lights and sound and like all the attacks look so spectacular and all this stuff, and it's like, wow, I'm really having a huge impact. But then if you just pause for a second and just like let your character stand there, it takes ages for the enemies to kill it. Like you're not really in any danger. Like until you come across some of the bosses where you'll need to use healing stuff and that. Some of the bosses feel a little bit unfair in that they can kill you much too easily for the amount of training that you've had up to that point. And again, I don't want to say it would be naive for me to think So the resurrection plumes things that you lay at Phoenix Downs, basically, you can use just to resurrect immediately in place.
Spot the Final Fantasy player.
Yeah. Like if you die and you just want to resurrect within the dungeon, you have to spend one of these feathers, one of these plumes. But they're a limited resource, and the easiest way to get them is just to buy more.
Right.
So you can get them through the game, and you really don't have to buy them, but you do have to grind for them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So there are all of these bits in the game that, if you're not as experienced with games like this, because it hides it better than others, but if you're not as experienced with games like this, I think you could be forgiven for being like, oh, it doesn't do any of that horrible free-to-play stuff. Well, it does, actually. It just hides it in the design of the game and what you do, rather than saying, we're going to take this away, and now if you want to get it back, spend a tenner.
Yeah.
Like, it's much subtler than that. It's much cleverer than that.
All right, so then two things, because I think, so there'll be some people that don't care about that, right? Like, there'll be some people that don't mind, even if they were aware that that's happening. They're having a good time. They don't mind reaching for their wallet at a time when they might be being manipulated to do so, and they'll do that. But I think the more important point to make is, because we've had a conversation about this, and you're very clear on the notion that, of course, the people that made this game need to get paid, right? There isn't any element here of you railing against the idea that it's a free-to-play game. Why should I have to pay any money? Like, there's artists, creators, everybody else needs to get paid. And I understand that there can be, there's different ways of asking for that money or of eliciting that money. But the issue is not that there should be money changing hands at all. It's the way in which it's perhaps being disguised.
Yeah, because you can see that the game basically has compromised its design to an extent in order to facilitate these free to play elements. And you can see it on things like you only get 2 XP for killing an enemy. I mean, that is absolutely outrageous and devalues enemies to the point where you only engage them if the mission says you should. Like, I would just run past every single enemy in this game unless a mission says I should. It's just not worth your time. Like, really, it's not worth your time for 2 XP. Like,
that's funny,
just run away.
And it's funny because I'm currently playing a game. At the moment that I can't talk about at the moment, that does exactly the same thing. But that is not a free to play game. That is definitely a premium game, and yet they still are using the same tactics. So that's odd. I'm not sure what the thinking is there. I, for example, can get 500 XP for dancing, but killing 30 enemies, I might get 70 something XP. So, that's an interesting
it's a dance
comparison.
Competition game that you're playing. So
It
totally
could be,
makes total sense. I also think it's important here to point out on Lost Ark that for the more hardcore players, and this is definitely where I sit on the game, and it's definitely where I sit on the game, knowing now how easy the game is to level in the leveling up phase. Loads of people say the game really starts at 50. Like the rest of the game 1 to 50 is just, okay, if you want the story and you want then just plow through it. Because what you should really be doing, if you're serious about the end game content, you shouldn't be using really any of your resources in the lead up to that. You should be saving absolutely everything, because if you want to grind dungeons later and then you want all of your resurrection plumes intact for that, because you're going to be dying in those and you're going to want to resurrect on a spot rather than resurrecting for free at the very start of the dungeon and everything resetting. So that's the point where I worry about the game being free to play in from how I want to play it, is am I going to get to a point where I'm grinding out dungeons and then I'm using these resurrection things, and then in order to get the resurrection things back later, I'm either going to have to grind for them or spend real money to play. And then that's where, so we don't know how that's going to work yet because I haven't gotten to that point, but I can feel some of these systems already pushing and pulling in one direction or another, just make it subtly easier to achieve this and subtly easier to achieve that. And I think if you're grinding dungeons, that subtly easier is going to become, if it provides a 5 or 10% advantage, then that's going to become giant. A giant benefit over time. So I don't know, we'll see. And then does that split the player base, because you've got some players who have got 1 million of these resurrection things and some have only got 10. So are the people with 1 million going to want to play a dungeon with the people who have got 10 because they don't have enough to resurrect? So you might as well get someone in who it's so it's those sort of things. that I worry about moving forward. But I don't know. It'll be easy to see. It'll be nice to see how that does or doesn't impact the game negatively. I mean, as I am enjoying it. Like, it is well made. It looks brilliant. The world and characters, the attacks, the bosses, like the scale looks really good. I mean, there's certainly some things like Diablo could learn from just the spectacle of it. Like some of the dungeons and stuff. Like, it just looks crazy. Like, it doesn't like this sort of game, this sort of like isometric game. You don't normally expect for the camera to suddenly pan out, and there's a whole vista of the whole environment, and then there's like, you know, a boss smashing through the floor. Like, it does look absolutely spectacular. And it is fun. It is very, very compulsive. It's just, sometimes you can just feel those like little tendrils of, you know, it's almost like the forbidden fruit, you know, it's like you can almost feel the bits that you don't like. There's
something
the
wrong
scenes.
here.
But
there's little, the mask slips every now and then. And I mean, I would say that some of that is definitely on account of the amount of MMOs, amount of games like this that you have played, and your general experience level with games. You know, as part of your professional life, you interact with games on a design level. So I think there's potentially things in there that you're seeing that other people might not, or that it won't bother them as much, or that they'll be thinking, well, this is my game now for the next 9 months or however long. So I'm kind of okay with putting in a couple of hours every day and getting those levels, getting those easy to achieve XP leveling up points, and then perhaps for, you know, like people get to a certain point, maybe they get to that soft level cap and they fall off it at that point, but by that point they've had however many hours of entertainment and they're okay with that, you know. There's different. I'm sure somebody somewhere has done like a breakdown of the psychology of MMO players, of the different types of player. And it sounds like Lost Ark will appeal to a lot of people that other MMOs perhaps haven't done, like people that can't stand the grind, for example. Like this is removing that entirely by the sounds of it. So,
well, until you hit level,
at least
50.
in the early levels, at least until you get to,
like, for me, it's not grindy enough. Like right now, like everything just seems very transient. Like, you go to a new area, you get a new thing, you go to the next area, you get the next fast travel point. Like, everything's just flying through it quickly. Like, it's just like, here you go, here's stuff. Like, we're being really good to you by giving you all this stuff. Please stay around. Oh, you want to stay around? Oh, you thinking about leaving? Here's another thing. Like, stick around and maybe spend £2 in a little while. Like, there are elements of that in it, but I do like it, and I have to save judgment until level 50 plus, because with someone like me, like us, with this level of experience on games, like that's the game. Like, getting from 1 to 50 is just training mode, really.
Well, I think that leads quite nicely into the second game that we're going to talk about, which is Sifu, which definitely does have some grindy elements and definitely is not too easy. Almost comically so.
One thing.
Yeah, go on.
So just on one thing on Lost Ark. So so we've both, well, it's not really about Lost Ark, but we've both played Sifu a bit. I'm the only one that's played Lost Ark. Are you tempted to play Lost Ark?
I'm not really. No, it's not. I don't know what. Once upon a time, a long, long time ago, I remember being interested in Guild Wars 2. That was the first MMO I'd kind of really had any real interest in. I played a bit of that. It wasn't what I'd hoped it was going to be, or not hoped. I didn't really have general expectations. It just didn't. It didn't excite me in the way that I had wanted it to. And since then, I kind of dip into an MMO every now and then. But Lost Ark, I don't know. It's shiny. It's new. What I do need, if I was to have a go and dip my toe into it, would be a very low barrier of entry, which means not queuing for 2.5 hours on a server. And some of that is just because we've touched on this before, but some of that is simply because of my setup. My PC is in my office. I'm not gonna sit for 2.5 hours after work in my office waiting to play. So you know.
I mean, I don't sit there for 2.5 hours waiting.
No, of course you're doing it. I know you're not there like glued to the screen, like waiting for something to happen. You're doing other stuff. But even so, like, I need to be able to just put it on and play it. I haven't logistically, it just doesn't work for me any other way. So
yeah, I mean, the server issues will be sorted out over time. I have gotten in a couple of minutes again occasionally. It's just that, I mean, yesterday on Sunday at like 10:30 a.m. I got in almost immediately. Well, like 15-minute wait. But then at like 6 o'clock, it was like 2.5 hours. And at some point, I had to reload the game a few times as well because I just got an error message saying the whole game is full up and you can't even queue.
Right.
Not today. That will be sorted out over time. But it'll probably take a week.
And so in a few weeks, if I think, I might, have a look at that now, then that's when I'd be most like when the conditions are such that everything is just quite straightforward, and I can just, guarantee that I'm going to get on and not have to find some far-flung server somewhere that can accommodate me. So yeah, it's not, I think that we've had games like this before where you've played quite a lot of a game, or there's stuff about it that intrigues me when I haven't played it, some of which I then go and pick up and some of which I don't. But yeah, Lost Ark, I think a bit like New World, really. It's just sort of like, yeah, sure. I mean, it sounds, I understand that it's appealing. Oh, no, I understand. No, for me, I mean, in terms of having not played it, it's like, yeah, I mean, I can understand the appeal, but it's not a thing that directly appeals to me, and I probably won't.
All right, well, if you want to just send me the money that you potentially would have spent on it, then I can spend it in game.
Then I'll live vicariously through it. You share your screen with me, and you can buy spend all the money on in-game transactions.
Yeah. Okay, so sorry, I just wanted to before moving on to
establish a position. Yeah. So yes, then so a game that certainly isn't too easy, that does have grindy elements, and that is definitely not an MMO. It's single player, and that's Sifu, which I've been playing recently on PS5. Now, this is one of those games that is like, I think it's going to become a thing of, Sifu, that's that game that's really hard. I think it's going to become known. I mean, it's already known a bit for being difficult. I think it's going to become known for that, and it's a bit like the Souls games are just those are those games that are really hard. If somebody who hasn't played them knows anything about Souls games, it's that they're hard. That's the popular language around those games, and I think Sifu is probably going to become another one of those. It is hard. It's not like it would be unfair for it to be known as that, but there's some things that Sifu is doing that games in this space of like that are difficult or are challenging, or you have to bang your head against the wall a few times. I think it's doing some stuff for me that other games in that kind of realm haven't done. But before we get into that, so you've certainly played more Lost Ark than Sifu, right? Like that's
way more, yeah.
Debatable, undebatable, not debatable. So I've played a decent amount of Sifu now, and what's your sort of immediate or your early experience of Sifu and difficulty? Do you do you have a feeling about it when it comes to that, and whether it is unfair or whether it's, because there's also like talk of there being difficulty levels added, which currently there aren't.
I don't know if I would go so far as to say unfair. I think the difficulty level is certainly steep. I think one of it expects you to quite instantly become to have memorized all of the controls and everything that you can do. It gives you little ability, for example, to practice parrying or dodging before it just puts you in front of like 5 or 6 people every fight. So in order, learning the parrying and the dodging, I found with multiple people was difficult, more difficult than it would be if they just like more gently said, here's 1 enemy and now here's 2 and now here's 3, rather than just here's 5.
So that's I've
don't know if I'd say it's unfair though. I don't know if I'd go so far as to say that. I think it's definitely, I think it would feel unfair if the only thing you've ever played is Uncharted. But if you're used to the Souls games, I don't know if I'd say it's unfair.
Okay, so for me the difficulty, this is a game that, having gone into it, it's one of those games I have a lot of time for, which means, because of, I think partly it's just the whole the whole package is appealing to me up front. Like I think it looks gorgeous. It sounds fantastic. I like spending time in the world of Sifu, which then has a knock-on effect of me then being more willing to engage it on its own terms. There's been games like that before for me. Sekiro was one of them from Software, but that I never actually got round to really understanding or grappling or, like, I suppose mastering. Every interaction with Sekiro felt like I was grappling with it, and it didn't ever click for me. And there was a parrying system in that, as there is in Sifu, that was the thing that ultimately I just, for whatever reason, couldn't make it. Wasn't consistent enough with it for it to feel like I was at least in control of, like, the decision making. There was just too many times where I would be at the mercy of, like, I failed to do this thing and now I'm dead. So Sifu has a similar thing with the parrying, with the dodging. But what I like about Sifu is there's like a I suppose it's streamlined is one way of putting it, but there's like a purity of systems. The thing that you're being asked to be good at is the thing that you're doing all the time. There isn't a big exploration element to this game. It's not open world. You don't run around interacting with people outside of fighting with them. You have very occasional dialogue lines, but there's like your 90% of your interaction with the game is via the combat, and that's the thing that you're being asked to be good at. So there is a repetition, as in, you know, it's not repetitive in a negative way. There's a repetition in that you're doing that thing, you're building up that muscle memory, and you're being exposed to attacks, and you're seeing what it is you're meant to be reacting to and learning all the time. And that doesn't you don't really get a chance. There's no like cooldown on that. You don't then spend 20 minutes not fighting anybody. So that works really well from the way I think that I learn, which is perhaps the problem I have with Sekiro. You can die in Sekiro and then, you know, you have to redo a whole load of stuff. Whereas here it's you die, you just get back up again because of the way the age and death system works. So, and also off the back of games like Hades, which I've played, you know, hundreds of hours of, there is something that's, I feel like there's kind of the brain patterns already there that fits the way that I play. I'm used to that. So I can go into it and go into a level, get knocked down a few times and not feel like, oh, this is a wasted run, or this is like, you know, a waste of time. Is I'm learning stuff the whole time. That doesn't mean that I won't then quit out of a level and be like, right, well, I need to restart this, because if I've died that many times that quickly, I'm probably this isn't going to be like a best run for me. But nonetheless, I feel like that's not the end goal. Isn't for me isn't yet the get to the very last boss. It's just the get better as a player. And that's why I liken it to Hades as well, because there's like different stages, and Returnal. There's different stages of the game as you move through the game. And at the moment, even after a few levels, I'm still at the just learning the basic language of the game and how to apply that, rather than trying to master it.
Are you finding that that's enough though? Because like in Hades, you're going through and you're learning the game, but you're also going through and you're unlocking stuff all the time. You're unlocking new weapons and stuff. So you're unlocking new things to learn and new ways to be good at the game. But does that happen in Sifu?
I mean, yes, you make moves permanent. So you unlock more and more of your moveset by leveling up, by putting XP that you've earned into those moves. And once you've spent a certain amount of XP on a move, that then becomes permanent. So then you have that at the very beginning of your next run. So yes, there's enough there for me. And there's also shrines that you get to that, depending on how old you are when you arrive at them, or what your score is when you arrive at them, or how much XP you have when you arrive at them, you'll get access to different things. So there's a little meta game kind of thing happening that is in and of itself enough to stave off frustration, because I'm not expecting to see the end, just like I did with Hades. I'm not expecting to see the end boss of this game anytime soon. I'm expecting to have to do runs and runs and runs where I'm improving myself and I'm unlocking these incremental upgrades to then arm me to eventually go to that final boss. And I'm pleased that, to me at least, that feels like it's there. It doesn't feel like Sifu is. It doesn't feel like it is expecting you. It doesn't seem to be communicating the idea that it's expecting you to get to the very last boss straight away. Like there is this notion of this is what the game is going to be for you for a while. It's just going through these first couple of levels and deciding whether to redo a level to try and lower your age, because that plays into the death system. The younger you are, basically, the more chances you have to keep resurrecting. So there is value in going back to the early levels, even once you think you're pretty good at them, going back to the early level to set what is effectively a new high score or a new youngest age, because that then helps the rest of your run as you go forward. So yeah there's lots of different stages, and I'm in the very early ones, but those are rewarding enough for me in their own way to keep me moving through it.
Yeah. Do you think the core combat mechanics are good enough to be relied upon as the be all and end all of the game? Like if the reward and the reason for getting through the game is to be better at combat and get those high scores, is the combat good enough in and of itself to be the star of the show to such an extent?
I think there's some camera issues more often than I would like. Like the camera can get a bit stuck, or depending on where you are in the level, not stuck, but it just backs up into a certain way that it can leave you exposed to attacks, which isn't great. Like that's, if it feels like you need to provide players with the information, if you're going to then knock them down and be put sort of a dampener or be detrimental to their forward progress, then you should be giving them all the information that you can visually, and in this case that means the camera. But the actual combat, yes, is very enjoyable. I think the married with that though is the onward progress of each level so far has felt distinct and has its own personality, be it visually or from an audio perspective. And that is also a reward, a bit like in Hades with like unlocking new conversations. It's not the conversation side here, but it's just seeing a new thing. It's like understanding how this fits into the wider game and like the personality of each boss. There's like a Kill Bill kind of ethos to the environments and the boss that's attached to that. So that is also its own thing. And so going back into level 2, for example, the club, like I've been back into that level several times, and each time it's enjoyable just to be in that level. Like the music's really good. The movement through the level feels like it makes sense. It's thematically consistent with the fact that you're in a club. So yeah, so far I think there's enough to be rewarding. I can absolutely see that it could also just be considered frustrating, and some people will play it and it certainly doesn't make your progress easy or even a given. I can absolutely see people like playing it and not getting off the first level for a little while. I can see that for sure. So, and that's, that can be a big barrier to entry for people. That doesn't feel good. Or if you're not looking at the game in a certain way, it might not feel good. So I suppose there was, a conversation we had a while back about like Returnal, and that's Returnal's status as sort of a AAA game. And is it fair, given the way that it's structured, that it would be positioned in that way? Sifu it doesn't have the price tag. It's not super cheap, but it doesn't have the price tag of a AAA game. So perhaps the expectation can be played with slightly differently. But yeah, I do understand if there are people that have played it and are just like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't work for me. I'm kind of bouncing off it. But so far, I don't know that I'd go so far as to say it's like my next Hades, but it's certainly a game that I'm enjoying and enjoying just doing those first 2-3 levels like a few times just to get a feel for what it is and to level up my own understanding and my own playing experience. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's also the only game for a long time that I actually have used the training mode in. Normally I don't bother, but this actually feels like there's real kind of mechanical benefit in doing that. So it is hard. I would be a shame, I think, if it just kind of got known for being a game that's hard and not much else. But yes, currently it is quite difficult. If they introduce difficulty levels, that will help, of course, some people. But yeah, I don't think I would play it on anything other than kind of... I certainly wouldn't increase the difficulty at this point, but I don't think I'd put it down either. I'm kind of interacting with it on its terms and enjoying doing that.
Okay, so that's it for another episode. That's what we've been playing. Come and chat with us on Twitter. We are at Indie by Design. Let us know if you're playing Sifu, if you're playing Lost Ark, and what you think about those games. But otherwise, thank you again for listening, and we'll see you again next time.